Hello, everyone. Th- Thank you for joining our session meetup. And last month we went to a consensus conference in Texas. That everybody was talking about real world assets, right? And thanks Rajat is also here, right? So I think it's very timely that we talk about real world assets in Nepal, because Nepal has a lot to benefit from the digitization of real world assets, right? Especially when cryptocurrency, government is looking cryptocurrencies in a different, lenses, right? One of the biggest utilization of blockchain we can do in Nepal is on real world assets. So today, I think I'm going to talk about what is real world asset. There's a process. Uh, how to bring real world assets to the blockchain. And we're going to talk about some use cases that Razadai is going to present. So I think I'm going to start with my slides. Uh, so I will share. Okay. All right. So I think the best way to talk about real world assets is, let me put mute because I'm getting. So the best way to talk about real world assets is we start from the Great Recession that happened in 2008, 2009. What happened?
Santosh हजुरको sound आइरहेको छैन.
Complete failure of, tracking of the underlying assets.
Santosh हजुरको video off गर्नुहोस् न.
And Bitcoin was born because of that, I would say, right? The cryptographic work had been done for a while, but Bitcoin was done during that time, because some cyberpunks, right, did not wanted to, have the same problem that banks all around the world is controlling how the assets and in a very opaque format. So one of the biggest culprit of Great Recession that happened in 2008, 2009 is something called mortgage-backed securities that was backed by subprime loan. So how mortgage-backed security works is, so there are mortgages for every house or lands in US, either commercial or residential. And what they do is all of this bank buys the rights for the mortgage payment to a lot of these, most of these houses, and they, package it, they securitize it. Basically, they split it in small pieces, and then they sell it to institutional investor as a security, or they sometimes even create REIT, right? So
Santosh एकैछिन है.
Sorry guys, there's a technical issue, I guess. Okay, all right. So team अर्को internet data internet छैन? Let me I'll send the video. Rajda start गर्दै हुन्छ नि त हैन? Okay. Oof.
Hello, Santoshi. आवाज आइरहेछ?
Yep.
So we can start. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Last item, otherwise I'll record the video and send, okay?
Okay, sure.
Right, so let me find
You can start from beginning.
Hang on. Let me find my slide.
फेरि फर्स्टबाटै स्टार्ट गरिदिनु ल. हामी के पनि बोलेको. ओके.
Okay, how is it now? It's good?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Sorry about that, guys. We tested it yesterday, it worked. So I don't know why the internet is not working. We didn't test the crowd. Okay, all right, back to so mortgage-backed securities was the one of the biggest culprit to the Great Recession. How the bank bought all the subprime loans. Subprime loans are basically people who cannot fully afford mortgage, right? Banks were using different creative methods to give them loans. So in that way, they would buy these loans, package it up, divide in small chunks, and then they would again package it and sell it to the institutional investor, right? And then worse is they would again use this small mortgages security mortgage, now not the mortgage security, to repack it, and it went through several rounds of repackaging and reselling, and they were to sell to even the government entities around the world, because it was special the US housing market. Everybody thought it will only go up because it had been going up for 10 years kind of thing. So Nepal didn't have that problem because there's not a lot of mortgages, plus there is no securitization of mortgages yet, right? So that was, and then when everything crashed, they tried to disentangle all the asset classes, and it was very difficult to untangle the assets, to trace the asset, which who is actually which mortgage is what securities represent what. Was it become worse and worse because it was just the data issue. A lot of time is there are two particular problem is, one is the data issue, and another problem was you know the the loan were given to the people who could not even afford it, right? And that there's no clear proof of tracing. People are making all sorts of things. So in response to that, Satoshi Nakamoto created Bitcoin. And then in 2015, interesting thing happened was a kind of Ethereum. It's a programmable blockchain, where you can really write different kind of smart contracts immersed, and that enabled a lot of things, right? Digital assets, bought to a lot of digital assets. Okay, we hear about ICOs, where different currencies are issued in blockchain. And we definitely heard about NFTs, and we heard about DeFi and everything. Now, in the target is you want to tokenize everything, right? So basically, when as you go into the more and more digitized world, right? And now the blockchain has been invented, right? So you would want to tokenize everything that you can see, that has value. And because as we will understand later is, once you tokenize, you can do a lot of things with this asset class. So now what are our RWAs? In blockchain world, till now, everything is represented in form of tokens, right? So we want to we want to tokenize everything. So what real world assets is, so far in blockchain, we have digital arts, all of those NFTs, a lot of utility token to use the system, transfer the value, all various things are happening right now. Finally the traditional finance, we call it traditional finance, and traditional banks are interested in blockchain. What they want to bring into is their product based, like tangible assets, which is like real estate, and intangible assets like bonds, stocks, treasury, everything else they want to bring into the blockchain world, right? Because banks around the world has realized that the settlement, the reconciliation is almost instant if you use blockchain. And that's another thing that in Nepal we really want to promote banks to deep dive into the blockchain, and which is basically if you deep down, one most likely that you will be making some real world assets is so that first of all the cost is really low compared to what you are using, right? You spend a lot of money on creating security, right? Blockchain could give you out of the box. And the infrastructure cost would decrease significantly. So bringing this, and then you would be able to, once you digitize all of these things and put it in blockchain, there will be different kind of creative products that you could create, that could serve to the customers. So in Nepal, one of the first thing I would see, is to create, RWAs are, it could be our stock market or, letter of credits and things like that. So let's talk about a little bit benefits of RWAs. Right? So more important, one of the interesting thing about RWAs is you can take a big asset and split into small pieces, right? We call it divisibility, right? Small pieces, right? You have a big hydropower project, right? And banks are already doing it in a traditional format, right? And you call it shared security or something like that, right? So in this world now you are, but what happens is somebody takes a custody of that whole asset class, right? It could be government, it could be big corporation, something, and they issue the certificate. Here, you can represent all of that digitally, right? Create a very small pieces, and you can able to transfer it to and you really want the piece of it, the digital stamp of what you are getting. And once you make this asset class into small pieces, it's easily accessible to a lot of users. And the difference, and if you ask me what is the difference in the current process and now, this newer process would be, right now all of those is controlled by few different houses, like the stock exchange and then few other companies. So once you have securitize, tokenize it, a lot of small banks or small companies can also issue these kind of things on their own, right? Which is interesting if you think about it, is there has to be a process of verifying, auditing and everything, and then you issue your certificates to the customer directly. So in that way, now if we bring in more participants, because people with like 1,000 rupees can start buying your stocks, right? Because right now most of the stock market is catered to people who have like a lot of money, lakhs, crore, like so why cannot people with just couple of 1,000 rupees invest in the stock, or in any, not necessarily the bigger stock or small companies like that. So one of the use case I would say is even small companies or medium companies can offer their tokens as part of their equity holding without going through a bigger process, because going an IPO is a very costly thing till so far. Going an IPO, that's why it prohibits smaller companies, smaller businesses, even medium business to share their share in public, right? Maybe this will bring this new set of companies from the supply side and the new set of investors, very small holder investors to this space. So there will be a lot of increase in liquidity. Transparency, now I would want to call it transparency with privacy, in a sense, is all of your work, all of the physical assets would be auditable, and then all of the transactions would be, you can see it real time in blockchain, right? And the proof of transfer would be there. So without telling exactly who transferred it, unless you have authority to see it. So that's how it maintains the privacy of the individuals behind it. And most importantly, is one of the benefits of RWA is, once let's say real estate and all these asset class became programmable, digitized, you can program it, you can automate it, like after certain condition is met, it will automatically disperse the funds. I would say all your current situation in the banking situation is, every time you want to sell the house, you put a lien on it, and then you have to go to Malpo to go, and it takes so long for Malpo to ask them to go check back with the bank if there's a lien in the house or not. If you digitize it, all of those conditions that if you want to transfer it, if there's a lien in your real estate, bank can digitally put it so that it prevents transfer, selling or transferring that assets class. So you can really program it. And again, the basics of all of these is we have to digitize everything. So how to create an RWAs, right? It's a very standard process that so far, and of course this could change over time. First of all, you would have to find an asset that's, that you want to create an RWA for, right? Because not every asset needs to be, converted into, put it in blockchain, I would say. There are assets that has a lot of value. There are a lot of, that needs a lot of trust, right? And that needs an automation. There has to be some optimal size of the market size that you would want to create RWAs for. And then you choose, in blockchain, there's each assets could be represented to different tokens specs, right? There are fungible and non-fungible tokens, right? Fungible tokens means you would want, it can be divided into smaller pieces. It can be owned by different entity, right? Same type of token. And non-fungible is like NFT, that you really is it's one, you cannot own a piece of it. You have to own whole or nothing. So real estate is a great example. Is every kitta kaatne गर्ने भन्छ नि हामीले, every time that is, each kitta can represent basically a token, NFT. So now basically now we are bringing the NFTs feature into the real world assets, and then into the real estate. So that's, and then after that you use an NFT to represent our real assets, like let's say real estate. And then you could, if I want to subdivide it into a, I guess if there's a like big real estate asset, and then you want to sell it to thousands of investors, then you can represent another token, fungible token like ERC20. That's a token specs, right? ERC20 to that are tied to the NFTs of real estate, and then you can sell it to smaller pieces. So, and then all of this could be automated. And one of the most interesting thing about it is, in Nepal, you can do it right now, because as long as you can, as you don't sell this token outside of Nepal, send it, transfer outside of Nepal, I think there's nothing blocking it. There's no, I think legally nothing is blocking it, right? And then you could even create your own permission chain or a public chain, right? And depending on the regulations, right? And there is a chain selection. A lot of times, different banks can join hands and create their own private chain, right? And then you can issue these RWAs in these chains. In Nepal case, most likely if all the banks join hands and then create a kind of blockchain that's shared across, they can share all of these asset transfer between them. It becomes really so it would be NCHL in steroids, right? So that every bank can see the, very openly do their transactions with other banks, right? Without having a middle party to have a middle, the weakest link. So they can directly, at the same time, because of the cryptography, it would basically put it very secure. It only the banks that's allowed to look at the information, even though you share the network, only the banks that's allowed to see particular asset class, or the owner of the asset class are allowed to do that, using your own private key. And then another thing is issuance and distribution. Now this is more for the public. If you're going to distribute to the crowd, public, you'd want to have like almost you do how the stock IPOs are issued and distributed. It's the same process, but you do it on chain. And interesting thing about this is, if we put it on public blockchain, then you can distribute to the whole entire world. You don't have to just be connected to one country, and that will increase a lot of liquidity. Let's say if eventually, right, in this blockchain and the tokenizations will just keep increasing. Eventually, as Nepal's market gets open to the whole world, right? Think about how much investor you can bring the investor money inside the country. At the same time, people who would be able to own assets anywhere in the world, right? So even Nepali would be able to. So as the government is looking into this, and then understand the regulations, how to regulate it properly, right? And that's something we can technically start thinking about it. And most important part of it is every physical assets are represented in the blockchain, right? Now there is you need to have a proof of reserve, right? Proof of reserve means now somebody's, because these are physical assets, it's in somebody's custody, right? Once in custody, you want to make sure that that person, that organization won't manipulate that assets, right? Or do some like, I guess, funny business behind the scene, right? So this should, like, periodically, sometimes in real time, sometimes periodically, you will have to give that, the custody, the reserve is there, right? And then you have to publish, you have to find a mechanism for a way to publish it. And we'll talk more about the proof of reserve in the next slide. So let's look at the proof of reserve, right? So everything in real world assets should be backed by something, that's not on chain, right? And then these things, you have to put a proof that, these things are not, are exactly the way it was, like, for example, in real estate case, right? The house could eventually wear and tear, or you could even put enhancements in the house, right? You're basically, the reserves, the value of the underlying class might have changed. So you could basically go through another audit process, right? And then you could issue more tokens based on that, because more the fungible tokens based on top of that NFT, right? Or if there's some damage has happened, then everybody would, that proof needs to be put there, right? And then, like, for example, if you are using your bond as a, kind of creating a RWAs for the bond, you should make sure that, all the premiums, everything would be paid, has been paid on time, all of those, because people want that information. They're buying it for the value of it, So it just, the proof of reserve just wants the underlying assets to be very, very, very transparently published, either through auditing process, or, if your reserve is the digital asset itself, just put it online, and then, all the transactions for that particular digital assets, it's always like that. So the idea is, and eventually as governments gets involved, right, a lot of, like, in case of real estate assets, so if there is any dispute, that's where, court system would come, right, to, if any reserves is manipulated or something like that, So ultimately, even in stock market for now, like, Nepali stock market has gone digital, but eventually behind it is, there's always a share certificate, somebody is in custody of that share certificate, right? So now, if you can create, like, and there is no, except the regulations, there's no prevention, there's no transparency that how many shares are quietly added, right? So that does happen. That, there are, like, maybe 1 million shares, somebody adds another 10,000 without letting people, they keep trading, and then they'll just, I guess, burn it, right, after they get the profit, right? And that's because that's a problem of the opaque system, right? Now, when you have, let's say, if you create a stocks, RWAs for stocks, and then if you create 1 million shares, it will, and you have to create it on chain, and it would be auditable on chain, right, in real time, right? If you add few more, everybody will be able to see it, even the computer system will automatically alert people that, okay, somehow the supply has increased, right? And then if it was, and then suddenly when the supply increases, the price would decrease, and if there's any fraud, it would decrease significantly. So that's why the transparent proof of reserve is very, very important. The role of government, especially for the physical asset, real asset, the role of government is very, very, very important, because that's where, their role is to make sure there's, it becomes conflict free, or untangle the conflict if that happens, right? Roles of banks are very important. The future banks will be a little bit different than in the current bank would be, future bank would be able to do this, add reserve. So this could be a new service eventually, as RWAs comes in, because eventually somebody has to take custody of the physical assets, right? Think about gold, for example. The gold ETF in US market, nobody buys physical gold and sells physical gold, right? It's just a represents of gold they buy and sell every day, GLD and other tokens, right? Other security. So somebody has hopefully here, put the physical gold on it, and then gold in their vault, and then they put a kind of audit report once in a while. So that's now this would be on chain in this case. So, and then a little bit of market size. We're going to talk about market size here is, so the total global assets in 2020 was around $510 trillion, right? And out of that, around 68% was real estate assets, right, globally, right? And then real estate asset is the one that has, in more, except few countries, a lot of countries are still not quite a digital asset yet, right? So we have a 3 trillion market just on 347 trillion market, maybe more now by now, right? Just in the real estate side of it. Think about it. If you would be in Nepal, you could choose any assets in the world, right? Then you want to invest in, right? So again, the estimate by Boston Consulting Group is I think it will be more than this, right? But in 2023, when they estimated it, by 2030 there will be 10 trillion assets that will be tokenized. Given the rate it's going, I have a feeling that it will be much more than that, right? And then 10 trillion is just 2% of the global assets. So I think by 2030 it might be much bigger, because given the speed of how much how speed everything is tokenizing around the world. And so the cryptocurrency market itself is around $2.5 trillion now, right? So, and cryptocurrency does not really represent physical assets. It could except stable currency. It could represent the utility and use of its network, right? And that's going to grow on its own, and this will grow. Again, gold is one of the case that could, or most of the, even though we see a lot of gold in Nepal, right? Most of the world just stays in the vault, right? So gold will be one of the best use case that could be converted into RWAs. I'm sure it's being done right, a lot of it being right now, but almost all of the gold in the world will be maybe it's a couple of $1 trillion will be converted into RWAs, right? In very good, like, near future, because it's already in the vault. So, and then, but once you create RWA, what happens to it, right? And this is something very interesting we need to understand. Is this something called decentralized finance, right? Decentralized finance consists of multiple aspect of it. Is one is called decentralized exchange, right? In Nepal there's only one exchange right now, is NEPSE, right? I think they got permission to get another one, right? But the way decentralized exchange is, imagine a way, each bank can create their own exchange, like I'm not create, meaning put it out there, support they can deploy it, and then let the community exchange on their own, and eventually the decentralized exchange can work in a sense that, even bank doesn't need to eventually control. So, and so to speak, anybody can create an exchange. If you think, if there's enough buyer and seller out there, right? You don't even need to be a bank to create an exchange, right? So just the way, you just need a software, right? And then it matches, somebody wants to sell something like, HamroBazaar, right? If you think about it, HamroBazaar is a kind of a exchange, right? So, but you would be able to create every different kinds of, if I want to sell a hotel or just a piece of hotel, right? Like I have a restaurant, let's say in Jamsikel, and I just want to sell 10% of it, right? Then I would just offer, I will have my audit document to back it up, my valuation, right? I would, create token out of it and sell it, and whoever wants to buy it, buy it. Yes, of course, there are some risks, right? We'll talk about it a little bit, right? But in that sense, there will be a lot of peer-to-peer exchange. I think the original Nepali, I think everybody heard about I'm sure everybody heard about Dukuti Khelne, right? Dukuti Khelne is the I guess one of the first peer-to-peer exchange in Nepal, right? And it's still there's some places going, you only play with the trusted people, I guess, right? So, but that's what it is. You are actually exchanging present value with future value kind of thing, or the future value with present value, right? And then that's a very decentralized way people made money, right? Or got money from their community. So another thing that you could do in the decentralized finance is one of the biggest thing that let's say collateral is one of the big thing for Nepali bank. They always struggle with it, right? Because because most of the collateral comes from jagga, I guess, in Nepal, right? Or the or the commercial or residential land. So you spend a lot of time just evaluating the jagga, and you spend every bank, your bank evaluate, or bank needs to go and do the revaluation again. If let's say if government gets involved, people banks and governments collaborate, right? And then they kind of create a NFT for jagga, and then you could really, because you don't know the current value of jagga, because the selling process is very complicated. If the NFT can trade like maybe not every second, but every day, right? And then you would almost know the real-time value of that jogga. Then you can use that as a collateral. For example, one of the most popular product nowadays, in non-Nepal, I guess, where crypto-friendly places, is a, collateralized loan against Bitcoin, collateralized loan against Ethereum, right? So and then in Nepal, we do it, margin trading, right? You collateralize loan against your stock, because if you can determine the price of something in real time, right, giving collateral is much easier, right? Against, because it's cheaper for the bank, right? And then the value in the real time, so that if there is certain threshold bit, you could sell it to recoup your loans and other things. So that would be RWA's first disruption would be collateral. Once you digitize products and put in RWAs, and if you know the real time value of a land or a art or anything like that, you can use it as a collateral, right? And then, so in decentralized finance currencies, it's already the best thing is already happening is we have a cryptocurrency. People are doing millions and billions of transactions in decentralized finance, right? And so there are hundreds of thousands of decentralized exchanges around the world where people are already exchanging values, right? Only thing, the problem so far is government around the world has not been able to caught up with this technology, right? So and they don't know, including the US government and UK government and a lot of the Western government, they have not been able to figure out a way to regulate it. Slowly they are doing but there are a lot of demand and supplies of peer-to-peer marketplaces, right? And so that needs to be eventually be regulated, because it will there are a lot of risks, right? Because the governments are not involved, there are a lot of risks so far, which we can talk about a little bit of the risk, right? So RWAs is great. There's a lot of great things out there, right? Great use cases for RWA, but there are a lot of, these are only few risks that I would talk about. There are more than this risk. A simple thing like in the garbage in, garbage out. If you have already a bad way of evaluating a physical asset, right? And then if you put that information in, blockchain, of course, if you put a garbage, you'll be trading garbage, right? So if somebody wants to, somebody source force लाएर भन्न 1 लाखको के अरे 1 करोडको जग्गालाई 10 करोड भनेर राखेर गरिदियो भने, it will be a garbage, and eventually people will find out, again, by when investing in an asset, either you hire a technical person or you do it yourself. You'll have to do your research before you invest on it, right? And then sometimes we outsource that work to banks and governments, right? But still, if they collude and put a garbage data in it, you'll be trading garbage. So there's no other way of it. So that process, the digitization, the tokenization has to be absolutely very trustworthy, and that's where entities like bank, legal organizations come in. They have a lot of work now. This is a new business for them, right? To tokenize it, so that they are the one who's, because everybody can't go and start tokenizing everything. Banks, government, these organizations, these institutions has a lot of job to do, and then there's a lot of, I guess, money to be made for this process. And another thing is, yes, like everything, even the softwares we have already, they have bugs. And the thing is, here, we could put a lot of, there'll be lesser impact, I would say, in it, because each company uses software and then it only impacts this. But in smart contract, it's technically, smart contract does not care about a company or a country, right? It's global, right? So if small bugs happen, it could have a really big consequence, and that has happened. And that's one of the things, we are developers, right, at Rumsan, and we always say that smart contract has to be simple, so that the chance of bugs are small, right? So not everything that every programming thing should be in smart contract, only where the trust is necessary. The more things you put in smart contract, the chance of bugs are higher. So only what's necessary. And on top of that, it's costly. Any transaction in smart contract could be costly, because it costs to transact in smart contract. And another is, like, let's say you have clean tokenization process, your smart contract is good, everything is good, but still somebody needs to take a custody of physical assets, either real estate or or anything, or the art, or anything that you would want to represent RWAs. If that the custodians turns out to be bad, like everything else, right, you cannot really protect the RWAs. So the physical custodian has to be reputed, their reputation should be online, right? If there's something happens, right, that could be government, that could be banks, that could be any other organizations. The physical custodian is one of the biggest, like, I guess the weakest link in that sense, is that needs to be on. There are various ways to make sure they are responsible, right? But it's not 100% proof, like so there are few use cases. I think Rajat would start talking about this use case in more in detail. I just want to list out a couple of things that you can think about, like, right away. There are hundreds of this list, right? But these are just the 4 that we are familiar with. Stock, bonds, real estate we talked about. One of the interesting things is carbon credit. That's a real world asset that could go into blockchain, and that's a lot of companies, individuals are already working on it, right? Finance, a lot of, we have done a couple of projects in Rumsan to, create NFT for finance, so there are a lot of customers that they are interested in it. So basically, so these are, then Rajat will go in more detail in a couple of use cases. He's going to talk about Project Guardian that SCB in with Singapore government did. So these are some use cases that's already starting, right? But there's what I want to say, there's so much interest in RWAs, right? So much, everybody's talking about, and it's kind of sad when I come to Nepal, is because of various constraints we don't talk about it, because there's so much value to be unlocked. That's the thing. Again, like every asset class, I know it's going to be risky, but earlier you are, because risk reward situation, the more value you could unlock, and that's something we need to start talking about it, because we have been able, and we have already, I guess, missed the 2.5 trillion dollar asset class, right? It will just rise more, and because of lack of understanding would prevent us from bringing better regulations, right? And then cryptocurrency market is already 2.5 trillion plus. We have missed that boat. This is another 10, 20, 30 trillion market, that we potentially, if we don't talk about it, if we don't research on it, we're going to miss that boat too, right? So hopefully, we will take back something from this thing, and we start talking about the real world assets, so that, again, the more open the economy is, that's what internet doesn't care about countries boundary, right? Again, blockchain doesn't care about countries boundary, right? And it's just pure information highway, right? Internet is, blockchain is, pure information, pure value highway, regardless of where you are, wherever you are. Of course, there has to be local context to it, local regulation to it, but that should not prevent you from trading, a lot of good assets class, or bringing investments inside the country. But this will unlock a lot of it. So thank you. I think that's about it. Rumsan is doing a lot of this work, right? We for our customers, we either in the identity space, or in in the humanitarian space, or now we are looking into doing a lot of RWAs. We have a couple of customers that we do. We are creating tokens for fine arts, right? Art, one of the things that we do. And also another thing that we are also working on is, how can you bring AI to this space, right? So that it would help, for the greater good, in a sense, is like, a lot of things, like, like Jagga and everything like that. There is a lot of roles in AI to bring it, so that it's not just the manual process, a lot of these things. So that's what we are working in, that's what we're busy, and we're very excited to, I guess, present RWAs for this group. I hope we'll do more of this session, and we have Rajat ready, right, who is expert on this field, and I'll hand over to him. Thank you.
Thank you, Santosh, for sharing your insight about the real world efforts. Now I'd like to hand over the mic to Mr. Rajat to share the insight.
So, okay, Santosh, can you unshare your screen? Okay. So I'm just Q&A चाहिँ लास्टमा राखौँला हैन अर्को 15 minutes of we'll just end it and तपाईं के question छ भने we'll put it at the end and त्यसपछि we can go for lunch. Okay. Rajat, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Sunita, Patari? Yes. Okay, so let me start by why I'm here. Am I qualified to talk about this or not, right? So, I wear two hats. One is I'm a co-founder of dexFreight, so we're in business of doing logistics in the US and Mexico. And one of the things that we're always interested in is providing liquidity to transport companies. So in that process, we've actually, about 4 years ago, we started thinking about tokenizing invoices that the trucking companies provide and shippers provide and in that process. So I'll talk about that a little bit. My other hat is off. Okay, so my other hat is I work with a trade consortium called MOBI, and it's a consortium of large auto manufacturers, Fortune 500 companies, and I've been with that nonprofit. It's based out of California for a couple of years now, and we do a lot of Web3 related work. And tokenization has not come in yet, but we do a lot of very powerful credentials and how to improve the efficiency of supply chain and so on. So in that process, I've developed a lot of standards for the organization. I did write about RWA, even though it was not called RWA at the time, like 6 years ago when I wrote a book about blockchain, and everybody thought this was a crazy idea that nobody would want to do a fractional ownership, right? The idea of fractional ownership of an asset was completely irrational at that time. Fast forward a couple of years, we saw art NFTs. And even though we make fun of art NFTs, one of the things that I like about art NFTs is that people started to think about fractional ownership. They accepted the fact that they are interested in fractional ownership. And I think that led to the RWA because people just got tired of NFTs and they knew about the fractional ownership and providing liquidity to big assets like big arts. So I think the RWA is following that art NFT environment, even though the interesting part of RWA is now the fintech industry, the finance industry, and the regulators are all interested in using our RWAs. So my personal interest, is to make sure that we can scale it. And scaling it is not only about digitalization, it's also about regulation, risk, laws, compliance, and many of those things. So like I said, 5 years ago, we filed a US patent on tokenization of invoices, and we had to fight with the US Patent Office a couple of times. They did not understand what a DLT was. They did not understand why it has to be in the blockchain. So we had to spend a lot of money to get that patent done. So the patent is there. You can read it up. You can do a Google search on the patent. Okay. So Santosh talked about this process a little bit. I'll go really quick. So you have the stakeholders who wants to issue tokens against the real world asset, which could be land rights, equity, bonds, US Treasury, shares, invoices, which we do. And then there's compliance and digital trail of that asset. And then you create tokens against it. So it could be ERC20, ERC721, fungible, non-fungible. There's a new one now. I think it's called 3643 ERC, which is the variations of 20 and 721. And then the most important thing about this whole process, the whole thing is now you have the fractional ownership of tokens, and you can do peer-to-peer trading, peer-to-peer transfer of those assets. And that is where the real benefit of RWA comes in, right? And if you notice, there's a line on the bottom that says token issuance registered with trusted authority. And I'll show you an actual example of a token issuance done by a company called Arca Coin, which has been approved by US SEC. and I'll show you the whole prospect. And you can actually download the prospect, and you can see it. And if you look at it, if you read it, even though on a surface, it'll tell you what are the challenges of issuing a real world asset token and doing it properly and legally. Okay, so we talked about this a little bit, and one of the things I will show you is that there has been issuance of real world asset tokens in US under the regulation, and one of the limitations that the US government has done for now is that you can only issue those tokens to accredited investors, which means accredited investors means someone with a net worth of over $1 million. And the reason the US government usually does that is they want to make sure it doesn't go to like general population and then it becomes a mess. So there's a little bit of a cautious approach done by the US government. Okay, so Santosh covered this. I'm not going to talk about it. So this is what we do in invoice. We don't issue tokens, but what we do is every time an invoice is created by, let's say, a trucking company, so we receive those. So the whole process of creating that invoice is fully digitized. That means if it's a logistics company, then we record whether they picked up a shipment or not, whether they delivered a shipment or not, what are the GPS breadcrumbs of that shipment, who was the owner of that shipment. So we collect all that information and then package it into a smart contract transaction. So there is actually a full digital trail of that invoice. Right? There's no paper involved at all. And so, but we don't issue invoice. We obviously put all of that information in a smart contract. And what we do is we open up that invoice. You can aggregate those invoices, and we provide that to a liquidity pool. Whoever wants to come in and provide liquidity to that invoice. And then once that's done, then we send the money to the trucking company because they need cash right away. Right. So that's the whole point of invoice factoring is somebody owns an invoice, and then they're probably going to get paid, 30, 40 days into the future, but they need the money right now. So what we do is we then give them that loan through the USDC and even cash. Now, so what we're doing is we're doing a pilot in Mexico and US, and what we're trying to learn is money is not a problem. The invoice factoring is in an unregulated space in most countries. And so we don't have to worry about, getting approval from government and so on. The only thing we're trying to figure out is what are the business risks? Where do we make the money? And what are the tax situations? Because the US has a different tax situation. Mexico has a different tax situation. And so we're trying to learn by doing a lot of pilots. So we've been factoring about, I would say, $100,000 a month for several shipments in US, and we're actually going to start very soon in Mexico as well. So we're trying to understand not the technical side. The technical side of creating smart contracts is easy. That's solved. The non-technical part is where things get very challenging and very muddy. Okay, so I'll give a few examples. I'm not involved in any of these projects, just as a disclaimer. So this particular project was mentioned to me. It is a project in Argentina. What they're doing is they're creating tokens called agri tokens against soybean and coffee, and I think there's another one, maybe bananas. So they received a lot of funding from the investors. And what they're doing is they're basically providing a platform where farmers, especially large farmers, and even groups and cooperatives can actually issue tokens against the proof of reserve of their grains. And if you buy those tokens, then there are a couple of banks like Banco Santander, which is a big bank in South America. They will recognize that token as an asset, and you can actually collateralize that as an asset and to borrow cash. Right, so there's an incentive for people to actually own those tokens. They have a white paper. You can read it up. This is another example. There's a company called Realty, which is also a platform, and what they allow you to do is put real estate into tokens. So you can see the price of the real estate is $75,000, but you can buy a token which is at the price of $50.27, right? And then if you actually go to the website, they'll show you like, okay, the current price is $50.27. This house was eventually sold for, I don't know, $90,000, and every token holder got distribution of that profit. And I haven't looked at the details at how they do it, because the distribution of funds is one of the trickiest things, because you need to know who actually owns the tokens. Okay, this is another interesting. They received $65 million investment from BlackRock. BlackRock is a largest hedge fund in the world. They have $3 trillion asset under management. So what they do, this company called Securitize, what they do is they help companies issue tokens against assets like US Treasuries and other investment vehicles. So if you notice, there's about 15 or 20 different offerings here in the platform. So you can actually buy those tokens right now from this platform. The only problem is you have to go through the extensive KYC AML, because it's only restricted to, it's actually right now restricted to accredited investors only. So normal people cannot go and buy those tokens. So you have to prove that you're an accredited investor and you have a net worth of over $1 million. So it goes through that KYC AML process, because this is all done regulated, and they have issued prospectus with the US SEC and registered the whole offering with the US SEC. So one of the, you can notice that it only says, so they have the fund amount, and then what is the minimum amount. So the minimum amount is usually like $10,000, $100,000. So it's usually not available for retail investors. Okay, so I'll show you the offering from, if you look at the bottom middle ARCA. So I'll show you the prospectus of ARCA coin. And if you categorize all the problems that they mention in that offering, is something like this. So this is sort of a landscape of non-technical problems that they mention in making that offering. Okay, so obviously regulatory compliance, because you're offering a token, and in many jurisdictions, like in US, it's not the federal government you register your token. It has to be done with the state. So depending on which state you're offering token, some states don't even recognize the word token. So you have to say shares. So Delaware and probably a few other states is where they recognize the word token. So they have to be careful of where they're making this offering. So that's regulatory compliance. And they have trading markets. So what they're saying in the offering is that there is no active secondary market or primary market where you can actually, once you receive those tokens, there are no markets to trade those tokens, right? And that is something that has to be built over time. So that's a risk that they mention, is that, okay, you're going to buy those tokens, that's fine, but we're not offering any secondary exchanges. So you can send it to somebody else, you can trade it with somebody else in a peer-to-peer fashion, but there's no market for it. And then, okay, transfer agent is another important thing, because this is all regulated. In US, the law is that even though you do peer-to-peer transfer, you need to have a transfer agent, which is a company, typically a company that records who sent the token to who, right? Even though that record is available in blockchain, the transfer agent needs to reconcile who received which token to who sent which token to whom. The official record is the transfer agent, not the blockchain, right? And that's a problem, meaning it's obviously a manual process now, right? And that's the law. So they have to amend the current law of regulation to say, okay, we recognize the blockchain as a transfer agent, and unfortunately, it doesn't exist at this point. So that's another challenge. The proof of assets is very similar to proof of reserve. So if you're offering tokens against US securities, then you typically have to have another like another company that verifies and does the audits of whether you actually have the treasuries and bonds and all that in your possession or not. Then the issue of dividend distribution. So the ARCA coin is their underlying asset is U.S. Treasury. So U.S. Treasury has, it's a very safe asset. It increases, by 4% every year or so. So once you sell your token, then you should be receiving the distribution. Or if the company that is offering the token then they may say, okay, we're going to do a dividend distribution at the end of the year. Then they have to go figure out, okay, who owns the tokens, right? So that becomes the challenge, and that's where the transfer agent actually comes in. Tax issues, because even though this is token, and once you register it, it becomes a security. And in US has a very different law for securities, because even though it's token, they're considered as security. That means you have to pay taxes for capital gains. So you have to keep track of, when did you buy the token? It's like owning a crypto. You still have to pay capital gains, right? Or stocks. KYC ML is one big aspect. So the US government doesn't want the tokens to go to, Iran or Syria or things like that. So you have to do AML protections as well. Use of proceeds. So once you issue those tokens, you're gonna get the proceeds. What are you gonna do with it, right? So that needs to be mentioned very clearly in the prospectus as to, what part of the proceed is administrative cost, what part of proceed is technology development costs. So all of that needs to be mentioned in the prospectus. And obviously there's more issues. So what I'll do is, let me show you the ARCA coin offering. So unfortunately, so this is called a prospectus, that if you're offering tokens and you need to you register this with the US SEC, you have to create this prospectus. And in the prospectus, you have to be as truthful as possible, right? And if you scroll through the prospectus, change the screen. Yes, I guess. So sorry, it's a little blurry and small. So here's the ARCA coin. So they're offering US Treasury Fund, maximum offering 100 million shares of beneficial interest. So they still call it shares, which is it's actually tokens. And the reason they have to call it shares is because the US SEC doesn't recognize the word token in a legal language. And you can see on the table of content, you can actually see the issues and problems and risks associated with this issuance. So they go from, fees and expenses, financial highlights, what is the fund about, use of proceeds, investment objective, why are they issuing this token, risk factors. So they talked about smart contract risk, bugs, and so on. Management of the fund. One of the things that these guys have done is there's at least 5 institutions involved in issuing this fund. So each institution plays a very specific role in making sure that there's separation of duties and responsibilities in issuing these tokens, right? There's a company which does audits. There's a company which writes smart contract code. There's a company who is managing the tokens and so on. So I don't know why they did it, but it actually makes a lot of sense to make sure that your risk is kind of spread out between multiple entities, right? So management of the fund, how do you assess the net value of the underlying asset? So on what basis do you do the distribution of dividends? Peer-to-peer transaction, so that's allowed. There's a transfer agent here, which is a very different company. So one of their jobs is to go to the blockchain and figure out which address is sending tokens to which address, and which address belongs to which person or entity. So they have a hard job of making sure that their ledger is correct. Okay, what else? So what I can do is I can send this PDF if you want to read through it. I've highlighted the portion that you'll be interested. You don't need to read the whole thing. It's a long perspective. One thing you'll notice is that it's, even though it says ARCA coin, it also used the word or shares, right? So they haven't gotten away with the word shares, right? So it's still a share actually. I think it's right here. Right. So they register this in Delaware. Like I said, Delaware is one of the progressive states which allows the word interchangeably. You can interchangeably change the word shares with tokens. Okay, so it's a pretty long document, very easy to read. There's little technical stuff here. Yeah. So let me stop this. Let's go to another one. Okay, so we talked about this, we talked about this, talked about this. Okay, so this is a quote from the U.S. chairman of U.S. SEC, and he says, several questions need to be answered, such as how does the regulator know that they can custody and have a hold of crypto assets? And how can regulators be sure that the price of crypto assets aren't subject to significant manipulation, given these trades happen on largely unregulated exchanges? I think he's talking about the general crypto, but it still applies to the RWA token, right? There still could be manipulation of the token price. So how does the regulator know? You still want to know who is the custodian of those tokens for KYC AML reasons. So how does the regulator know about that as well? Okay, so Project Guardian, I'm not involved with this project. I've been reading their white paper and going into their website. This is a project. It's actually a pilot led by Monetary Authority of Singapore, so which is like a US SEC. And one of the things I noticed going through this website and paper is it is a collaboration between the regulators and the financial industry, right? And they recognize that there's a role to play for each of these groups. Obviously, the right side is going to offer tokens if they want to, right? They have the assets. The left side is trying to figure out how do we create guardrails in this environment so that there's very little manipulation, there's no scams and things like that. So, and if you notice that, to your right, there's a whole bunch of banks and hedge funds and so on. The pilot, I think, started in 2023. I may be wrong. So one of the things that the MAS or the Monetary Authority of Singapore is trying to figure out is what is their role? What is the role of the regulators? So what they've identified is they potentially, they have 4 roles to play here, right? One of the roles is how do we create interoperable networks? Because Ruchin may offer a token in one network, Ratin may do in another network. So how do we make sure those networks are interoperable such that the tokens can be moved around between networks? Okay, so what MAS is saying that maybe we should create that network, right? And I think Santosh talked about that a little bit about creating private blockchain networks. So they also want to be trust anchors. So they want to verify who owns those tokens and make sure the AML process, the KYC process are done correctly according to their regulation. The third and fourth one is basically creating protocols so that everybody that is involved in this process follows that protocol, and eventually there's a safeguard against around the whole issuance of RWA token. Okay. So in their paper, they also talked about sort of architecture, about what it should look like, the whole issuance of token. And obviously in the bottom is the assets. Wait a minute. Yeah, sorry. So in the bottom is the platform, right? So this is where the blockchain network comes in. So you may have one network, you may have multiple networks, but that's essentially the bottom part is your blockchain network. But after that, it's the assets. So it could be U.S. securities, it could be real estate assets. The top two part, the access part is then how do you access those tokens? So we talk about wallets and apps and things like that. The service layer is then what do you do with those tokens, right? So we do invoice financing, so that's the lending part, right? But other than that, you can do asset management, derivatives, and so on. So basically, they're presenting 4 layers of architecture in token issuance. Okay, that's my last slide. Thank you. Questions?
Thank you. You can say insights about audio. Hello. Hello. Thank you, Rajat Rajbhandari, for insight for your workshops. So I'd like to thank you everyone. Thank you all in person. Thank you for your speakers. So I'd like to now hand over my mic to our Rumsan CEO, eSatya, for Q&A session.
Okay. Thank you so much, Anla. Thanks for whatever. Okay. Thank you for coming in. So it's a long हाम्रो 1 घण्टाको सेसन पनि भएको छ हैन. So I just want to take like few questions हरु 3-4 questions हरु केही छ भने तपाईहरुको हुन्छ नि प्लिज अगाडि राख्दिनुस्. मैले नत्र एउटा दुईटा क्वेशन त मैले प्रिपेयर त गरेको छु. यदि फ्लोरबाट आएन भने तपाईहरु के क्वेशन्सहरु छ भने चाहिँ प्लिज हुन्छ नि. I'm happy to yes. I think you saying it's online for us on the site. Okay, there's a lot of notes.
You can hear, right?
Yeah,
Yes, I'm here.
Question, yes. Some observation, yes. Some thought process that I want to share. Obviously, oil perspective, RWA tokenizing is still more academic from our perspective in Nepal, right? But I think discussion like this will happen that way, and it's leading to something, right? I got a lot of questions, right? I'm not a technical guy, but I understand probably more from a business perspective. What you also explain to the tokenization of the model, yeah, sort of understand, but a lot of things don't apply here. But let me also explain this a couple of project cards, because you participate in that. Not also certain. So I'll try to explain this more in a banking perspective, how do you solve the bank's problem, right? From a technical perspective. Now, the problem with the banks is today, I can lend up to 100 if my capital is 30. I mean, so banks want to get more money. Right? You are restricted by your capital. And you can't lend because all the other options you raise more capital. And that's what the banks are doing. The banks will say convertible preference shares or return so because they're trying to raise more capital. If you want to lend more, keep on doing that. Your capital, your organized start becoming inefficient. So what banks Standard Chartered or project guidance slightly different. One asset like I'm trying to set it. Right? So I have asset like that. What is asset like sale? And so how can I sell that asset? Then the solution I do. Yeah, I do it. So paper system. I'm sorting asset. Now you are the one of that asset. And so now every time I raise cash from my customer, I pay you. That's one way of it. I can see that paper. I will not have paper. I will have this complete network. I put it in the block. So instead of issuing of papers, I'm actually issuing. Right? Which means now it's in the air, right? It's in the blockchain. It's secure. It's not paper. Nobody can get it. So that is what project guidance tries to do. So Standard Chartered Bank said, Singapore project. We started selling. We done the IPO. The first IPO, we have like some $500 billion to trade asset we have sold. But let me touch on the bank or some sort of survey. For the example, in 2009, 2008, right, when the global financial crisis happened, CTO, CMO, whatever, sit down with them. It's the same concept. Only now has come in a better form. Right? So this is a very good case for banks for Nepal. Now, one and all up now whether the technical aspect that needs to be solved. So if bank free started charging any bank wants to sell, I have a trade after charging base rate plus 5% to my clients. I will charge, I will give it to you, the investor. You can invest in it. I will say that 5% for base rate plus 5%. I will say base rate plus 4. You're getting 9% return, happy you will buy. And the banks that you have about, I'm able to show my bank. It's a great use case for the bank. That's one of the use cases which probably made sense, but obviously there are a lot of pieces that needs to be fixed. I'm going to share my experience.
Thank you. My always insightful comments are around. So, I think being one of the blockchain banking is really good. It's a really good use case. So maybe more research, academic point of view, and more research are still needed. And I think your discussions are so maybe platforms are more platforms are take over Himbal platform take over maybe more conversations are more stakeholders if they come together, more academic or more use cases are so much better are saying on a okay. Q&A yes, sir.
Very generic question.
Yes.
The first question relates to the difference between real world assets you are talking about,
right,
and the derivatives, financial derivatives that is only taught with the traditional classes. So what are the distinctions between the two that is one? The second, we were talking about blockchain, the technology that is offered between instruments, the operations. My questions on blockchain that is in operation in the world in different countries, how does it cohabit with the centralized system that we have in the current world? Particularly, second questions. Third questions relates to the development of the uses of blockchain in the past in the context of the digital banking, the mobile banking, currently doing it, using it, but there's a talk of a digital bank. The amendments to the last year talks of establishing a digital bank, a specialized bank. So although the digital banking is being done, services being offered by the existing banks, and there's a debate in South Asia whether we should have a separate institution, financial institution, such as digital banks, or the digital banking function should be carried out by the existing traditional banks. In India, this debate is on. The NITI Aayog that India has is suggesting for a digital bank, but the Reserve Bank of India is saying that no, not need a digital bank. The existing banks, commercial banks, they are the financial institutions, can offer, if they are offering the digital banking services. So in this context of the debate in South Asia and the amendment to here suggesting the separate, the digital bank, how would you see the development of blockchain in the context of establishing a separate specialized digital bank? Will it promote, or will you have to wait some years to come to benefit from the blockchain in terms of reducing financial intermediation costs and other costs as well? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for your question. So more, I'll just summarize the three questions he had asked.
Very good questions. Santosh.
Okay, so one is the question is, what's the difference between the derivative and the RWA? Your first question. Second, saying how would like decentralized technology like blockchain technology, how would it coexist with decentralized banking? Since already used by ecosystem, how would it coexist, or will it add value or not? On top of third map, something related to this digital banking, जुन चाहिँ काफिया like digital banking service right? So this much, how would blockchain add value or not? So Santosh, the first question say RWA versus derivative. Now, what's the difference between that?
So I think derivatives are one when financial products matures, right? If you look at it, the banking model, it always starts with the basic things like a depositor deposits money in the bank, and then creditors take out loans and other things, right? So that's the basic fundamental of the bank, right? And then now that there's so much money is moving around, right? And, what happens is banks would start thinking about there's a lot of bank being a capitalist entity, right? They'll try to figure out to make as much money as possible. That's what their job is, right? By using the money that depositor have put. And then they come up with different products, right? Synthetic products, and then they will, they'll try to, basically create product on top of product, and then they derive different kind of products, right? So basically, eventually, we consider them as different kind of derivatives. And then so blockchain space, like there's two aspects of it is, so blockchain, as blockchain matures, the basics of blockchain is value transfer. Or you transfer value from one entity to another, one party to another, right? And that basics without, having like a double spend problems, all of those, that has been solved, right? Any cryptocurrency trading asset matter, we already have different kind of derivatives, different kind of synthetic products in crypto world, right? So RWA's case, a lot of time is what RWA is trying to imitate, and there's a kind of threat to it too. Is RWA is trying to a lot of if traditional banks take charge of RWA, there's a threat that RWA will just look like exactly what it is. I think the point of RWA is, yes, the physical assets needs to be tokenized, but different various creative products can create out of it, not just the traditionally what you are doing, because once the assets become programmable, right? There's so many things that you can do with it. So RWA is basically the basics of digitizing, tokenizing assets, right? It will have its own derivatives as it matures, right? There will be a lot of different funding mechanism. You can use you can fractionalize RWA into multiple things. You sell it to different aspect. You create another product on top of that. So eventually there won't be any difference between derivatives and RWAs. RWA is just the basics of it, ABCD of tokenizing the real world assets, right? But you can't really compare it, because eventually RWA will be turned into a derivative product eventually, but it's just that once we have to tokenize it first, and we are going through that basics first. So it's almost like giving a birth to a new asset class in a digital asset class, right? And eventually that RWAs will come, derivatives will come in RWAs also.
Thank you, Santosh. I hope topic first go somewhat answer by first one. Yes, so there are two more. So second match saying I'll pass this to.
I'll take care.
Okay, but I'll pass this to Rajat Ji and Seni. How will blockchain technology coexist with the centralized the banking, like the service or technology that already exists?
So let's say you're a project or that's like it's not related to banking. It's a supply chain project. हाम्रो प्रोजेक्टमा चाहिँ कस्तो छ भने तपाईँको ठुल्ठुलो कम्पनीहरू जस्तै होन्डा, निसान, माज्दा, सुजुकी उनीहरूको एउटा कन्सोर्सियम छ हैन। अनि अभियसली उनीहरूको आफ्नो आफ्नो सिस्टम हुन्छ हैन, दे डोन्ट टक टु इच अदर। अनि सो उनीहरूले के भन्यो भने ओके सो हाउ डु वी शेयर डिजिटल एसेट्स विथ इच अदर। अनि हामीले के प्रपोज गर्यो भने लेट्स क्रिएट ए नेटवर्क, इट्स कल्ड परमिशन नेटवर्क। ब्लकचेन नै हो तर डिसेन्ट्रलाइज पब्लिक होइन कि प्राइभेट। तर त्यो नेटवर्क अभियसली नेटवर्क भनेपछि त्यसमा नोडहरू हुन्छ होइन त्यो नोड चाहिँ हरेक कम्पनीले एउटा नोड चलाउँछ जस्तै होन्डाले एउटा नोड चलाउँछ निसानले एउटा नोड चलाउँछ दे क्यान रन 2 nodes सुजुकीले एउटा नोड चलाउँछ होइन सो इभेन्चुअली द्याट बिकम्स ए परमिसन नेटवर्क अब त्यो परमिसन नेटवर्क चाहिँ होन्डाको सिस्टमले कसरी इन्टरेक्ट गर्छ सो वी लिभ द्याट अप टु होन्डा तर हामीले त्यसमा चाहिँ उनीहरूको आफ्नो corporate system र enterprise network connect गर्नलाई connector design गरिदिन्छ okay and so they can talk to the network and then send digital assets to other people other entities who are also part of the network so that's one way of doing it right? So the other way of doing it is basically everybody just works on a protocol they agree on a smart contract templates and then basically deploy the smart contract on like Polygon, Ethereum, whatever. So that's another way of doing it. So basically, सबैको आफ्नो independent system हुन्छ अनि independent system ले त्यो permission network लाई connector को थ्रुबाट connect गर्छ हैन अनि त्यसपछि तपाईको token transfer गर्ने हो कि credential transfer गर्ने हो कि digital data transfer गर्ने हो त्यो गर्न मिल्छ तर त्यसको त्यो permission network काम चाहिँ it's like it's a trust anchor भन्छ हैन त्यसको काम चाहिँ कस्तो हो भने जस्तै होन्डाले निसानसँग कनेक्ट गर्नु पर्यो भने त्यो नेटवर्कको बाट गयो भने त्यो नेटवर्कले ग्यारेन्टी गर्छ कि यो होन्डा चाहिँ होन्डा नै हो हैन यो निसान चाहिँ यो निसान नै हो नत्र त थाहा हुँदैन सो द्याट्स द त्यो नेटवर्कको परमिसन नेटवर्कको काम चाहिँ त्यो सो इट्स लाइक अ ट्रस्ट एंकर भन्छ हामी त्यो एउटा मोडल चाहिँ त्यो ब्याङ्कमा पनि त्यस्तै गर्न सकिन्छ त्यो एक्चुअली टेस्ट गरेको पनि स्ट्यान्डर्ड चार्ट पनि गरेर जस्तो लाग्छ मलाई
Very relevant is apart from series could be trading blockers. Or you pay what actually has its own challenges. In some way, it is intelligent in some way. And it's going to be possible for the beneficiary important. I can do one approach. And look like minutes of early when you got somebody approvals. This not a program, is also no part of the role, also everyone comes that platform, should be often put someone giving a line, if you don't want to go payment because payment is not allow you to log in. But the application can go lost. In that case, this is a free version, that would be one very benefit of blockchain. That you use this blockchain. But apart from that, banking. And once you share it, there's no risk much of that. It's so difficult to have it blocked. All the discussion that so all the members of that consortium is in that control. So it's pretty check. That's what something you have to do.
I think तपाईँले भन्नुभएको चाहिँ it's like kind of Rajatले पनि भन्नुभएको it's more of a consortium वेमा चाहिँ there needs to be a consortium coming together and data exchange like right.
So all the banks, whenever banks come together, there's a consortium. The moment somebody already got an text right. And in that consortium, different classes come together. I'm sure those three cases will be sure. It's more on the unless consortium end up attaining the result. We have a specific problem. So how about with the lead time? I also what is distributed as well. What government will I share the lead time is sharing your. I don't have that facility. Now let's suppose there's a consortium where everyone is a node. So these are people everything is recorded. It's documentation. And there's no of investment. Like
Audit trail हुने भयो एउटा, right?
that's another very difficult.
Right. So last उहाँले सोध्नु भएको क्वेसन चाहिँ यो डिजिटल ब्याङ्किङ यो नयाँ एउटा क्याटेगोरी अफ डिजिटल ब्याङ्क्स भनेर चाहिँ नयाँ क्याटेगोरी आइरहेको छ चाहिँ बाकियाले पनि गरेछ त्यसमा ब्लकचेन हाउ वुड इट एड भ्यालु मेबी माइकल आई थिङ्क यु माइट बी द वान तपाईँले नै पठाउँछ राइट
First of all, it's intermediation. How are they going to act? And we need that. And we will then rely on raising the existing tax and that. So we have to what I said, we really love those. And some of them having been to like always we get the past of us anyway. Past you need to start digital from past of this already. System payment system I think will make that. I don't think you can't have a digital time and then say, okay, for purpose of someone not going to get out, more time. That will work. So you will be shareable of the value. So then and for things, you don't have to. Some problem will only have to like you soon. But it's all the most important thing is to happen is the data. What is this process? And if you don't have a digital ecosystem, then the bank will go in your account.
Right. Okay, so तपाईँले भन्नु एउटा
ब्याङ्किङ र ओपन ब्याङ्किङ सेम कन्सेप्ट
digital banks and digital banking, there's two different work.
Really have to know well, not law or action. Very fast control. So how do you do it? And the first time God is going to do it. But pretty much of the time.
Right.
So I always legal framework said it's a good thing, not necessarily country, but we need the legal framework. So that's why people like him talk about this so that teaching the laws are made.
Okay, thank you. So last मैले summarize digital bank को चाहिँ I think there needs to be an infrastructure and identity payment को र तपाईको open data exchange को चाहिँ infrastructure भएपछि I think digital bank मा चाहिँ the infrastructure like blockchain would add more value to it. So until unless त्यो digitalization को हिंसा infrastructure नभएसम्म चाहिँ so value चाहिँ blockchain add नगर्ला digitalization मा. That's what I'm hearing from your side. Okay. So just to wrap it up, any final questions? Kehi cha bhane natra bhe I would yes, Uditji. So okay, Raj, do you want to?
Yeah, so कोलम्बियाको एउटा ब्याङ्कले मलाई अप्रोच गरेको थियो उनीहरूले भर्खर त्यो डिजिटल ब्याङ्क सरी ओपन फाइनेन्सको ल पास गरेको थियो नयाँ प्रेसिडेन्ट आयो उसले डिग्री गर्यो अनि इट्स अ 6th largest bank कोलम्बियाको अनि उसले मलाई के सोधेको थियो भने सो हाउ डु वी डिल विथ दिस रियल वर्ल्ड एसेट अनि के अरे त्यसमा रेगुलेटरी फ्रेमवर्क पुग्छ कि पुग्दैन त्यहाँ इन्भाइरोमेन्ट छ कि छैन होइन डिजिटल त्यो डेटा सबै ट्रान्सफर गर्नलाई यताउता उनीहरूले चाहिँ मास प्रोजेक्टलाई हेर्दा छ प्रोजेक्ट गार्डियनलाई सो I think they're leaning towards doing like pilots अनि पाइलटबाट बेसिकली सिक्ने मास प्रोजेक्ट गार्डियन पनि त्यही हो पाइलटबाट सिक्ने हो अब पाइलट गर्न सकिन्छ कि छैन द्याट्स अ क्वेसन नेपालमा I think Michael may be able to answer that question more than that.
That's why always the learn from this, learning from God, and then we know what gets done. So, and that would be, India, identity system, now, even as all issues, system, I'm not going to say that it's so simple as research for an identity. Unfortunately, identity system I can actually share my identity with whoever I want. It's my identity. And certainly some of the identities take government. And why should my identity stay with a centralized person? It's my identity, I'll check it, and I will share it. That's the same thing. That's what we're going to do. So, which is all the identity. Simple program is all. You see the program, whatever is a different. And if you draw it,
You are at least question, okay.
So, okay, so sorry about that. So, things are activities being done. It's not fully used for the disaster. That's why the legal price what takes out the what would be the the low hanging? This is the one 2008 9 was through actually. There was nothing project could be needed, but they were not illegal. So there is a say legal, illegal, and non-illegal. So, again, to talk about what if it is within the real world assets, schools, or maybe farmers, or we will growing interest of it. What would those engagements? Like, how can we actually, see something getting started? I don't say it is a pilot or something like that, but it does not. There's only compliance part, but it actually does touch the grounds and do the investors.
So, okay, so just to summarize, if Santosh जीले सुन्नुभएको भएन, so RWA को aspect मा चाहिँ नेपालमा what could be एकदम low hanging use case एउटा गर्न मिल्ने work अथवा pilot अथवा के छ एउटा use case anything हुन्छ नि नेपालमा गर्न तपाईहरुको perspective मा चाहिँ
So okay, I can take over. So one of the thing I see is that Nepalma a blockchain promote गर्ने एकदम important छ हैन the transparency and openness को part ma हैन. So we are working with few banks, right, trying to एकदम low risk कुराहरुलाई blockchain मा ल्याउने try गरिरहेछ हैन use cases हरु हैन रातको थ्रु हैन तर at least bank के आफ्नो products हरु चाहिँ कुनै चाहिँ low hanging would be I could see is mutual funds हरु ETF हरु create गर्ने because नेपालमा पनि बिस्तारै mutual fund ETFs हरु create भइरहेछ that's based on भन्न त्यो share हरु गरेर हैन because share are pretty they have very limited number of shares stocks हरु छ नेपालमा हैन है and then a lot of companies organized are trying to use it हैन the capital market उनीहरुले चाहिँ they are trying to create mutual funds ETF हरुलाई लिएर based on that so I think अहिले चाहिँ I can't say that whole share market नै RWA मा ल्याउ भन्ने हैन के त्यो share लाई हैन भइसकेको share लाई ल्याएर जुन चाहिन्छ त्यसलाई RWA बनाएर भन्न म्युचुअल फन्डमा राख्ने अथवा ETF हरु बनाएर गर्ने हो त it will be the easiest way I think regulatory wise पनि it would be it there won't be a lot of complications because जुन चाहिँ म्युचुअल फन्डको रेगुलेसन छ त्यसमा ल्याएर रिप्रेजेन्ट गर्ने मात्रै हुन्छ होला हैन सो आई थिंक दोज आर द त्यही नै हो सजिलो नै अहिले गर्नको लागि हैन अरु त लाइक आई कान्ट say real estate हरु I think it'd be much more difficult or एकदमै सानो ग्रुप अथवा स्मल कन्सोर्टियमले गर्ने भने चाहिँ इन्भेन्ट्रीलाई RWA borrow would always, especially agro inventory, right? Because there are a lot of things happening. Inventory based loans are on आइरहेको छ होइन, right? तर आइसकेको छ in a sense is, inventory आउँछ जान्छ कति हुन्छ गोदाममा कति हुन्छ, that's another thing that I can see is, तर चाहिँ एकदम लो एकदम स्मल कन्सोर्टियम गरेर गर्न चाहिँ मिल्छ होला, so इन्भेन्ट्रीलाई.
Okay. Thank you, Santosh.
So Santoshको background चाहिँ banking भयो, like banking थियो, मलाई त्यस्तो banking थाहा छैन. So मेरो bias चाहिँ so I like two projects. One is AgroToken. AgroToken किन interesting छ भन्दा it works. It doesn't have to deal with the regulation that much. तपाईँले अब त्यो AgroTokenले चाहिँ सोयाबिन कफी आफ्नो वेयरहाउसमा राख्यो, त्यो बन्डेड वेयरहाउसमा राख्यो. अब त्यहाँ अभियसली त्यसको प्रोसिजर छ होला, त्यो प्रुभ गर्ने होइन, यति टन छ भने यति टन भनेर प्रुभ गरेर राख्नु पर्यो, त्यसको आफ्नो प्रोसिजर छ. तर रेगुलेसन र रेगुलेटर्सहरूलाई त्यति छुनुपर्छ जस्तो मलाई लाग्दैन. अब अर्जेन्टिनाको नियम त के छ त्यसको त थाहा भएन. सो आई लाइक द्याट प्रोजेक्ट. अर्को प्रोजेक्ट बायस भनेको इन्भोइसिङ पनि हो. अब अमेरिकामा चाहिँ इन्भोइसिङ एनीबडी क्यान लेन्ड मनी अगेन्स्ट इन्भोइस. त्यो रेगुलेटरी एस्पेक्ट खासै त्यस्तो छैन त्यसमा. जस्तै अब हामी लेन्ड गर्छौँ, हामी we're not a bank. It's simply because we have money to lend and we know the process of lending. तर युएसमा चाहिँ एउटा सिस्टम चाहिँ के बनाएको छ भने आई थिङ्क दे मेड इट, उनीहरूले एउटा ल बनाएको छ, त्यसलाई युनिफर्म कमर्सियल कोड भन्छ, युसिसी. तपाईँले कसैलाई लेन्ड गर्यो भने तपाईँले स्टेटमा रेजिस्टर गर्नु पाइन्छ कि मैले यो मान्छेलाई अथवा यो कम्पनीलाई मैले $100,000 लेन्ड गरेँ भनेर गर्न पाइन्छ होइन. त्यसको फाइदा चाहिँ कस्तो हो भने नाउ यु हेभ अ ट्रस्ट एङ्कर. त्यसले यदि डिफल्ट गर्यो भने तपाईँले क्लेम गर्न पायो होइन. सो इन्भोइस फाइनेन्सिङ अब यहाँ कतिको चल्छ मलाई खासै थाहा छैन, मैले चल्दैन भन्ने सुनेको छु. Maybe that's something the banks can look at. सानो अमाउन्ट, ठुलो अमाउन्ट गर्नु पर्दैन, सानो अमाउन्ट. Regulatory issue के छ त्यो पनि थाहा भएन.
So thank you, Rajat. I think to summarize गर्दाखेरि I think unregulated market, the asset कुन digitized र track easily गर्न सक्ने र stakeholders को buy-in भएको projectsहरू चाहिँ would be easy to handle होला हैन. मैले summarize गर्दाखेरि चाहिँ unregulated marketमा गर्दा चाहिँ just गर्न पनि सजिलो चाहिँ हुन्छ होला. So
yes, रुचिन इन्टरप्ट गरेँ, त्यो नेपालमा अलिक a lot of time त्यो सहकारीहरूको एकदमै इस्युज छ नि त होइन, राइट? a lot of times सहकारी त्यो पैसा लिएर के गर्छ कतिमा उपयोग हुन्छ कि थाहा नै हुँदैन क्या होइन, राइट? अनि इट्स अलवेज बिन अ काइन्ड अफ फ्ल्यास पोइन्ट भनेर जब प्रोटेस्ट फर सहकारी. मेबी द्याट त्यो चाहिँ आई थिङ्क इमिडिएट, आई डोन्ट नो कतिको सजिलो छ त आई डोन्ट नो, तर इमिडिएट निड चाहिँ होइन सहकारीको एसेट, त्यो युज अफ एसेट RWA बनाएर वान अफ द थिङ इज युज अफ एसेट्स केमा गरिरहेको छ त्यो ट्रान्सपेरेन्ट आएर त्यसमा गर्नु. आई थिङ्क नेपालको आई थिङ्क अहिलेको इमिडिएट निड चाहिँ त्यो चाहिँ छ होला होइन, बिकज देयर हेज बिन क्वाइट अ बिट अफ इस्युज because of the सहकारीको opaqueness ले गर्दा के.
के हुन्छ?
I got one question. Just for example, few years back, the crowdfunding was recently I was crowdfunding, at least yes. Given there are many public initiatives, could be initiatives like a stadium crew, each one have a corridor, innovation centers, different projects, getting portfolio open or the projects are looking at least project report innovation and we need different resources on that definitely. Because I think if I remember these are more development oriented from learning the aspects of the. Where does this stand if if you want to play with the technology, play with the mission and see that the technology actually is able to achieve that mission. This company key was absolutely just a very random part.
So एकचोटि फेरि क्वेसन एकचोटि हुन्छ मैले नै म त तपाईले केही पोइन्ट भन्न लाग्नु भने मैले यस्तो गरेर
Rajat, I understood.
Yes.
Because हामीले crowd funding गराएको थियो कि so मेरो एक्सपिरियन्स चाहिँ भनिदिन्छु अझ so crowdfunding को लागि US मा चाहिँ regulation CF भन्छ regulation crowdfunding available छ regulation D भन्ने पनि छ regulation A plus the difference चाहिँ तपाईं कति पैसा उठाउनु पर्छ हैन regulation CF मा चाहिँ $1 million उठाउन सक्नुहुन्छ 12 महिना भित्रमा from anyone retail investors minimum तपाईले ठोक्ने हो per share हैन 100 or 50 जति राख्न मन लाग्छ राख्नुस् तर रेगुलेसन चाहिँ क्लियरली लेखेको छ अनि त्यो प्रोसेसमा जानुपर्छ अडिट गर्नुपर्छ त्यो अडिटेड स्टेटमेन्टहरु देखाउनु दिनुपर्छ हैन अनि युएस एसईसी मा रेजिस्टर गरिसकेपछि त्यो ट्रान्सफर एजेन्ट हुन्छ ट्रान्सफर एजेन्टले सबै गरिदिन्छ प्लेटफर्ममा उनीहरु राखिदिन्छ तपाईले शेयर किन्ने सबै गरिदिन्छ त्यो बेलामा के इस्यु पुरा उठाएको थियो भने अब यसलाई टोकनाइज गर्न मिल्छ कि नभए हैन अनि त्यसपछि हामीले चाहिँ गर्न खोजेको हामी चाहिँ अब वालेटबाट टोकन ट्रान्सफर गर्नु युएस एसईसी माने किनभने एसईसी ले के भन्यो भने हामी यो चाहिँ हामीले त यो टोकन भन्ने शब्दै छैन हाम्रो रेगुलेसनमा सो वी क्यान्ट अलाउ इट तर पछि चाहिँ अहिले मैले सुनेको चाहिँ दे आर स्लोली अलाउइङ इट रेगुलेसन सीएफ मा रेगुलेसन डी मा पनि अलाउ छ भन्ने सुनेको छु मैले रेगुलेसन ए प्लस मा पनि रेगुलेसन डी मा चाहिँ 50 मिलियन उठाउन पाइन्छ रेगुलेसन ए प्लस मा अझै बढी जस्तो लाग्छ मलाई तर रेगुलेसन सीएफ चाहिँ रिटेल इन्भेस्टरहरु हुने भएकोले उनीहरु चाहिँ अलिकति कस्टियस भएको छ बट इट्स आई थिंक इट्स अ गुड युज केस तपाईले रेगुलेसन सीएफ जस्तो क्राउड फन्डिङ सानो रिटेल इन्भेस्टरको लागि स्मल अमाउन्टहरुको लागि जस्तै स्टार्टअपहरुको लागि पनि गर्न सक्नुहुन्छ धेरै स्टार्टअपले उठाउँ तपाईले you can either issue shares or tokens or both हैन तर आखिरमा त्यो चाहिँ कहीं त रेजिस्टर हुनु पर्यो टोकन भए पनि रेजिस्टर हुनु पर्यो शेयर भए पनि रेजिस्टर हुनु पर्यो
Central bank issued white paper on crowdfunding.
Yes.
I think it's a risk to the bank. And so that because got to white paper on the way, I actually shared it with my association. Only white paper I am. That was the plan also. In fact, it will replace corporate. Corporate just do. You should have an issue where you are salary one. Okay, to something like that. I don't think we can present a salary working. I get. The concept of it. And that's where
So मैले जस्ट अहिले लाइक हार्ड स्टप गर्छु है भन्छ हामी आई थिंक हाम्रो टाइम भन्दा अलिकति एक्सटेन्ड भएको छ 1 बजेतिर मैले चाहिँ यो कन्भर्सेसन चाहिँ हुन्छ नि लेट्स कन्टिन्यू आई थिंक तपाईहरुले यो यहाँ आइदिनु भएकोमा नै हुन्छ इन्ट्रेस्ट देखाइदिनु भएकोमा ब्लकचेनमा आरडब्ल्यूए मा इट्स मीन्स अ लट हुन्छ नि बिकज वी हेभ बीन अनि हेमपालजीले पनि भन्नु थियो हामी वी हेभ बीन लाइक यो अवेरनेस ट्रेनिङहरु पास्ट माइक अन छ हैन पास्ट लाइक 4-5 years देखि नै वी हेभ बीन वर्किङ अन दिस हैन अवेरनेस प्रोग्राममा अनि एटलिस्ट सीइङ 20-30 people सपोर्टिङ अस हुन्छ नि क्युरियस भएर आइदिनु भएको छ हैन मीन्स अ लट फर अस अनि यसमा पनि I would like this conversation अहिले भनेको जस्तै कन्भर्सेसन चाहिँ कन्टिन्यू होस् हुन्छ नि there are people from various fieldsहरु various सेक्टरबाट आइराख्नु भएको छ हैन so I would like this conversation to continue at least RWA मा ब्लकचेनमा हुन्छ नि क्रिप्टोमा यो कन्टिन्यू चाहिँ होस् हैन त्यो गर्नलाई चाहिँ बियोन्ड दिस रुम गर्न चाहिँ विल बी शेयरिङ हजुरहरुको यो नेम लिस्टहरु शेयर गर्दिला आजको स्लाइड्सहरु पनि हामी शेयर गर्दिन्छौं हुन्छ नि so that you have these resourcesहरु र रिसोर्स पर्सनलहरु पनि हुन्छ नि हैन यदि तपाईहरुले आफ्नो कन्ट्याक्ट इन्फर्मेसन शेयर गर्न चाहनु हुँदैन भने एक्चुअली अगाडि फ्रन्ट डेस्कमा भन्दिनुहोस् विल जस्ट वोन्ट डु दैट है त्यो चाहिँ हुन्छ नि तर ह्यापी टु शेयर इट हामी त्यो इमेलको थ्रुबाट हामी शेयर गर्दिन्छौं अनि वी वुड लाइक टु थ्यांक फर्स्ट अफ अल ऑडियन्सहरुलाई थ्यांक गर्छु आइदिनु भएकोमा तपाई टाइम मिलाएर हुन्छ नि फ्रम डिफरेन्ट सेक्टर अनि आज हाम्रो स्पिकर्सहरुलाई पनि वुड लाइक टु थ्यांक सन्तोष जी र रजत जीलाई ए ओके भर्खर एउटा अर्को इन्फर्मेसन हुन हाम्रो लन्च चाहिँ 1:30 मा मात्र स्टार्ट हुने रहेछ time. So if there's any questions, or we can just like keep like just like floor open sa God so discussion sa start गर्न भएको हुन्छ हजुरहरुले हुन्छ नि अर्को 15-20 minutes जति चाहिँ तर त्यो अगाडि I just like formally एउटा session and पनि गरिदिन्छु हुन्छ नि so that the speakers are like we'd like to thank Rajat ji र Santosh ji like so we have small token of appreciation for your effort and तपाईहरुको last minute मा हुन्छ नि टाइम दिनु भएकोमा last minute तपाईले टाइम दिनु भएकोमा नि thank you so let's welcome Rajat and let's thank him
सन्तोषको पनि मैले दिन्छु
सन्तोषको पनि छ or virtual उ पठाइ NFT
Yes, NFT would work.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
So, हजुरहरुको question छ भने we can continue or हुन्छ नि हामी चाहिँ we can take a break अनि we can cut 1:30 हो radio. So 1:30 around 20 minutes मा चाहिँ food would be ready. I think त्यो चाँडो गर्दै पनि हुन्छ होला. ए okay 1:30 मै हुन्छ होला हुन्छ. So will be available तपाईहरु please conversation हरु please continue and thank you for joining us. Thank you Santosh ji हुन्छ नि चितवनबाट join गरिदिनु भएकोमा.
Thank you, everyone. See you.